we were on a trip. He won a work trip to Universal, so we got to go to Harry Potter Land and a few other things, and surprised me on a day trip to the Crystal River where we swam with a manatee, and that was a lot of
Whoa.
fun. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Did you get to touch it? Did you get to like be
Yeah,
by it?
I swiped a finger. We were advised not to, but it seemed pretty comfortable with us, and it just feels like slimy fish.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome, man. How was
yeah,
the new Harry Potter world? I heard that like the what is it, the Green Gots, the Goblin Bank or whatever is the oh
yeah,
no,
yeah.
Ministry is the new thing, right?
Yes, it was fun. I'm not very familiar with all the movies, and so I just enjoyed it as an experience, but it wasn't something that I was connecting to,
Hmm.
to a book or a film. So, sort of a downer in that way, I guess.
Well, you get to experience it for through
Yeah,
like really unique eyes, right? It's like you
yeah,
get to see it
exactly.
in its final form and then go backwards if you
Yeah,
want, you know.
yeah.
Um, but that's hilarious. Yeah, my girl and I, we just it's funny. Harry Potter has been a big part of our world lately, dude.
Mm,
Not just like finishing the movies, because she never finished all the movies, and I recommend it. They start out kind of childish, of course,
mm,
but the movies do like mature with the characters, and it gets
mm.
serious at the end, and you're like, dang, this is a straight up adult film. You know what I mean? Not like in what adult film normally means, but you know what I mean? It's like mature. But that had to be cool though, swimming with the manatees. And did you guys eat some good food, or what else did you do down there?
Yeah, lots of good food. Swimming with the manatees was truly incredible. I mean, they're quite large creatures and gentle, docile, and uh, they can swim away if they're not comfortable with you. So I was really glad that this one particularly stayed close by,
Mm.
and we just followed her wherever she went, and at times she would stop and surface her nose up, and so there are cool videos of like me and her swimming side by side, and that was
Oh,
really, really special.
man, that's
Yeah.
so cool. It's almost like a form of like you've heard of equine therapy, I'm sure, right? Like
Yes,
with
I thought
horses.
about that. Yeah.
Did you get a similar vibe?
Um, yes, especially because when I had my equine therapy classes and we went out to stand in the field, I recognized that I had this expectation of what would happen. And I was projecting the same kind of expectation onto the manatee.
Hmm.
And so it was really good for me to check myself in this way and reorient towards what's happening in the present rather than what I was hoping would happen.
Totally, totally. And yeah, it's so funny, the equine stuff. It's fascinating because at a glance, it doesn't seem to make much sense to the modern person, right? At a
Mm,
glance, it's like, oh, you're going out in the field with horses or you're just being around animals. Like, that just
yeah.
makes you happy. Like, is that therapy? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but it's funny, I found myself in the field, wanting to be liked as well by the
Mhm.
horses. You
Yeah.
want the horses to kind of gallop around you, right? That's what everybody wants is like,
Yeah.
this kind of beautiful, like, symphony of horses just kind of enjoying themselves around you. But whenever that doesn't happen, and then you kind of deal with the repercussions of, hey, I thought this thing, it didn't happen. Now what?
Mm,
I found myself trying to feed the horses grass and like help them. It's like,
mhm,
hey,
mhm.
you want some of this grass? And like, it's funny how that applies to just like how we handle with people. Um,
Yes.
dude.
Yeah, we want to be chosen,
Hmm.
seen as worthy or good of being chosen. You could
Hmm.
say giving the horse grass could be an unconscious way of saying, "I'll give you something that you want if you will in turn like me."
Yes, exactly. And that was my takeaway. And I'm
Yeah.
like, do I do that? like, and yeah, it did kind of highlight like a pattern of, you know, I don't know, like offering things as far as
Mhm,
like a way to, I don't know, I don't want to say get attention, but to create the bridge to connection, maybe,
mm,
or maybe I'm
mhm.
just trying to make it sound better than it is. Who knows?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I did write a poem about this, about how I placed so much expectation, and then at the end, it's just horse grazing in the field. At the end,
Mm.
it's just me standing next to a horse grazing in the field on a planet in the middle of nowhere, and that's all there is.
Hell yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah, and I know poetry is such a big part of your life. You bring it up and you do the workshops at Naropa and stuff like that. And yeah, how did you discover poetry? I don't think I've ever asked you, like, what was it that drew you to poetry? Um, and some background around that. Like, what's the story?
Yeah. Well, this connects closely to, the question you posed for the podcast of, what is it that we need to do or what can help re-steer us towards each other? And for me, poetry is a very big element of that. Um, uh, it's a way to process the world and our experiences in the world without ever sort of definitively saying this is it. It's a way to point to something that's there and still have mystery around it.
Hmm.
Um, and and that feels more closer to the truth of who we are than to scientifically say this is who we are, you
Hmm.
know, with
Totally.
accuracy. I value that too. I think that that has its place. But for me, being in the mytho-poetic expands my understanding of self and other.
Hmm. The mytho-poetic.
Yeah.
Can you break that down? What does that mean? Like the mystery, the mythology, yeah. What does that mean?
Here's how I understand it. We exist here, so that's a fact. We are here, and almost everything else is a story we tell. There's a mythology. You could say our religious lineages have a mythology, and indigenous tribes also have a mythology of how we came to be. The mytho-poetic is this realm of myth and poetry that can inform us not just about who we are, but the possibilities of who we could become. And
Hmm.
so it is an evolution, it's an engagement, it's a way we get to see ourselves through a different lens.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's almost like I see you're engaging with the mythological what, and I don't want to say updating it, but it is kind of updating it. But it's more engaging with it almost in a it's almost like finding a relationship with the myth that we end up living in and perceiving the world from, right? It's like that Jungian concept that like every person is living a myth and you better find out which one it is because it might be a
Mhm,
tragedy, right? And it's this kind of concept about everybody being nested within this myth, right?
mhm, mhm,
And like what is the American myth, right? What is the um what is the communal myth? What is the personal and familial myth? Um I I frankly I love like Jung, of course, like
mhm,
any I think good therapist should. Anybody that studies like psychology, I don't know how you avoid just enjoying Jung for everything that he was. Um and this idea of myth and archetype and playing with these symbols that exist in the collective consciousness so that we can understand the symbols and use them in this poetry context where we can point to it right without giving a specific what description, a specific diagnosis, a specific like this is all this thing is, right?
mhm,
It's like
mhm,
an ever growing thing with us, right?
mhm,
Um, Yeah. I find myself thinking in mythological ways a lot personally. Is that a way that you kind of see the world? Are you like a mythological thinker, would you say?
Yes, absolutely. Myth and poetry are very closely related, and I do view the world through narrative and story, and there's a lot of room there to explore, um, to update, as you said, or to at least reimagine. So,
Mm,
you know what? One thing that comes to mind is we have this story of Eve and the apple,
mm,
and when Eve ate the apple, we were then punished to be on this earth.
right.
Um, but what if there's an alternative, actually? That there's this book, I'm forgetting what it's called right now, but uh, it retells story and history through a feminist perspective. Oh, it's titled Cassandra Speaks, and she says, "What if actually Eve was the mother of our current world? Because if we had lived in heaven for forever without duality, would
Mm,
we have ever come to know ourselves?"
mm,
And so instead of being banished to the earth, we were actually given this opportunity to experience who we are.
mm,
And instead of Eve being, tricked into eating the apple by a snake, what if we could say we have such a yearning and a longing to taste beauty? And that yearning and longing is what made way for us to be here today.
mm,
With all its tragedies, and even that can be beautiful. Not can be, is beautiful.
mm. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful way to look at that. Is the fall necessarily negative? Hmm. I mean, I can see it in a historical context being perceived as negative at first, or for a long
Mhm,
time, rather.
mhm,
I mean, you know, when you become self aware and you're dealing with not just like the elements in nature constantly trying to kill you,
mm,
and the constant discomfort that you're dealing with in life, constant pain of like, oh my God, I can't even imagine like Neanderthal life and like, as certain to, as we became human. And it's fascinating to think of all the pain necessary for us to get to a place to be able to look back and be like, that was beautiful because that was the muck that we were created out of. You know what I mean? That
mm,
humans were almost
mhm,
like forged out of. Um, and I think that leads right into like the Buddhist sense, right? Because it's
mhm,
like of the realms, of all six realms, the human realm is the one everybody wants to be in, right? It's
mhm,
like that's where all possibility is. Everything's all karma has been like equaled out in the God realm. And so there's nothing to do, right? There's no like new thing happening. Everything's like perfect.
mhm.
And yeah, it's is that an evolution of God, do you think? Or God consciousness to produce human, I guess? Is that like what the story is actually telling? I wonder.
Um, I can't speak for God, so I don't know what God is thinking or saying. But I can speak for myself. I don't know that I want to live in a perfect world.
Hmm.
Um, I can only yearn for non-duality because I live in a separate self. And I don't know that it's wrong to live in a separate state of self. It is part of our condition. So it's not bad because it exists. And then how do I work with what's here? Is there a way to long for something if I am already that thing? I really love the Sufi hadith of God saying, "I was a hidden treasure yearning to be known, so I created the universe." And
Hmm.
we can think of creation as an act of becoming, so I became the universe. I find this as a very worthy and poignant mythology that if everything is one, if all is God, that means God at some point was lonely and God yearned to be known. And in order to be known, there has to be an other. So God intentionally fractured its own self into all of us so that we could have the opportunity to love each other.
Mhm, mhm. I love that, man. And that's kind of exactly what I'm getting at with the question, right? Because it seems like, to your point about that story, right now, right, you and I having this conversation, we're at the most recent expression of the Big Bang itself, right? If the
Mhm.
Big Bang is even a thing that happened, the Big Bang happened and we're here right now, right? So all the things that happened in order to make like just this conversation take place. And the God forgetting himself or itself, right? Um, it makes sense in order to in an almost like an Indra's web sort of way, distribute like awareness in every form, right? In various levels of complexity to just explore creation in every perspective possible, right?
Mhm.
And it's fascinating because, and I'll use like a Mahayana sense where it's like the whole point of Mahayana Buddhism is like to create enlightened society, right? Is like to
Mhm.
become enlightened in this life, help others become enlightened, die, reincarnate, do it all over again until the whole society is enlightened. And I think if you look at like statistics about quality of life and the way like how people are living longer, and um, it seems like we're moving in this direction of kind of having less pain, having
Mhm.
less, uh, maybe not less warfare yet. I don't think we're there yet, but it seems like we're kind of moving in that direction, and it would make sense for like the God awareness in everybody. Because I do think that, you know, to speak to Sufism, like Hazrat Inaya Khan talking about how like your will isn't even yours. Yeah, right. Your
Mhm.
will comes from God, and it's your concentration that allows you to channel that will. Right. And so
Mhm.
if you're not
Mhm.
concentrated, your will's going all over the place, right? It's a person with ADD and like a, you know, in a city. You're just kind of like doom, 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 like all over the place. But the people that can focus that will actually end up like creating that difference in the world. And
Mhm.
so that Sufi recognition of God being closer to you than your jugular vein, it's like you can't help but be the expression of that, unless, you know, you're constantly shoveling stuff on top of it, or you're letting things kind of cloud your vision, or there's some sort of, whether it's like a true oppressive situation or a familial kind of like wrong or should, I guess, you end up kind of living by these instructions that aren't authentic, right?
Mhm.
And it seems like, and I'm curious what you think of this, that authentic expression is the God consciousness in every individual, that unique element that you get to explore through the God awareness you have
Mhm.
of the world. And that's like, yeah, I'm kind of just rambling on now, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, several things that you said stand out. First, I always love when I hear about the Big Bang. You know, just because it seems so like cosmic and just incredible and wow. And at times I think, what if in the grand scheme of things it was a soft collision? You know, like what if it was like um God gently making love to the universe and we softly bloomed in into being. Could that be a possibility too? Just
Sure.
just for kicks. um but yes, this God consciousness or God awareness, in a sense, recognizing that we are all and all is us, helps place us in a position to then approach life with compassion and with care, because what I do to you, I also do to me. even if it's not so clear how that is. I say a prayer every day, which is, may awareness dawn in the hearts of all beings. To say that I don't know the systemic solutions to our problems, but I feel very confident that if we are aware in the heart, we'll somehow find a way or somehow be open enough to channel the will of God or the universe to find its own way.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. You know, I'm glad you bring this up because what's interesting is that I think about this a lot, Moody, where it's like um, there are these things that we can run into, and this is something that Nathaniel talks about too, is the importance of a code, like, and say a moral code. I'll even go as far as to say that, even though the word moral has kind of been almost like polluted in a certain way to have a certain Christian vibe to it, but I don't see it that way, and I don't think it's worth kind of throwing it away. But there's this thing that happens, and maybe this is kind of how I conceive of sin, right? As because like the missing the mark, interpretation, or the
Mhm,
you have an authentic expression, and the things that you do to not allow that expression to come through is the ultimate sin. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Or
Yeah.
whatever it is that you're like keeping yourself from allowing yourself to express that. And I think a lot of that is actually forgiveness,
Mm.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Um, but there are some situations where, like for instance, I just got a practicum and it's going to be working with sex offenders, right?
Mhm,
And it's going to be challenging, dude, because, you know, not only is it, okay, say there's a spectrum, right, from like the most evil act to a situation where, say, a kid was like walking home drunk from the bar and ended up like taking a piss at night, and it happened to be by a playground, and he got caught, and then now he's got the sex offender label or something like that. um, so there's that whole spectrum that exists. But when you have that label on you, right, and now you have to tell everybody you're in an intimate relationship with, you have to tell everybody at your workplace, like, you have that mark on you, almost like a, tattoo on your forehead saying, like, I did something that's pretty bad that the whole society is going to judge me on. And
mhm,
it's like, when you have certain, I mean, the level of forgiveness you have to be able to have for yourself, knowing that anybody that sees that label or knows about that label on you is going to have a, a gang of just, projection to throw at you about whatever it is. Like, how does somebody find forgiveness and express their most ideal self, their truest expression with that kind of label?
yeah. To go back to what you said about sin being missing the mark, when I think about this, I also think of the mark as the center. So we can perhaps expand this a bit and to say to sin is to miss the center that joins us, right? Because that's
Hmm.
the mark.
Hmm.
And so we're passing each other and we're not attending to the space between us or the center that joins us. And in this way, maybe we're causing some harm.
Hmm.
So we've sinned in
Hmm.
in that way. And to me, sin isn't really about blasphemy or uh, doing something against the moral code of religious organization, but to really consider whether or not I'm showing up in harm or
Hmm.
in benefit to others,
Hmm.
and so to God.
Hmm.
Um, so I,
Hmm.
from that perspective, for me, forgiveness becomes a lot easier to deal with because so long as I can continually come back to the center, I'm opening up a space for someone else to meet me there.
Hmm.
So I'm being an active participant in being in the center. And when I'm in there, I realize it's not personal. And so I can forgive a person because I know that when we're not acting from the ground of our center, um, that's not really who we are.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I can forgive the person. It doesn't mean I don't hold someone accountable to their actions. And I
Right.
don't, those two are not the same thing for me.
Mhm.
So in your example with a sex offender, we 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 should and often do take um, or yeah, take the right consequences to that action, and yet I can still stand in a place where I'm not characterizing the person as a
Mhm.
bad person. So there's room for them to grow back into themselves.
Yeah. I mean, wow, doesn't that take like a radical change in community, right? Or a radical outlook change for our society?
Yes, that's where I think hope can get lost because one look around us and we see the sort of ignorance, and I don't say that as a judgment, just as a
Sure,
fact
sure.
of how we show up and act.
Mhm.
Um, and it's easy to point to others and blame and say, well, he's not and she's not, and they're not showing up with an aware heart.
Right.
But I can only focus on myself. And if I show up with an aware and open heart, perhaps the person I'm talking to has
Mm.
room to explore where that is for them as well.
Totally. And that's why the spiritual pursuit, I believe, is the subversive act to do that, right? Because it's about your relationship with something higher than just like a tit for tat kind of like,
Mm,
eye for an eye situation that things can exist as on the ground. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like you said, like if they're not going to open up, then I'm not opening up, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like just staying in that space.
Mm,
Yeah, of course that's going to reverberate. But yeah, it does take the profound. But you know what? This is so it's interesting. So just so I understand, so your idea of like what sin is, right? If is like to miss the center, and the center is that center of connection or that center of community or being in connection with others.
mhm,
Um, would you say it's even like is it being authentic in that space, or is it about doing what you can to create like a communal space?
mm. Yes, and
Mm.
you know, we find community by creating it. There are times when we stumble into a place and we're like, "Oh, wow, this looks pretty good. I'm gonna stay here." But we often create belonging in our lives, in the way we show up.
Mm.
Um, I you've talked about authenticity a few times, and that's something I think about often. I actually wrote a poem recently that I don't think would be too well received, titled "Your Authentic Self Does Not Exist."
Mm.
and and it seems to me that there's this chase of like, I'll do this journey, I'll
Mm.
buy this gemstone, take this class, do these practices. I'm sold all of these solutions to become my true self or to find my authentic self, and attached to that is a belief that when that happens, I'll be free of suffering or I'll be my most amazing, happiest, best self.
Mm.
And I think that's um, one, it's a delusional path.
Mm.
And two, it causes us more harm because it keeps us in the cycle of seeking something that isn't true.
Mm.
Perhaps authenticity is more related to the heart's moment to moment expression based on what's present.
Mm.
So, who I am with you is not who I am with my lover. I
Mhm.
show up in slightly different ways, and that doesn't make me inauthentic. It
Mm-mm.
means I'm actually fluid and flexible and able to accommodate the places that I'm in.
Mhm.
But to search for a fixed self, um, doesn't seem reasonable for me in a dynamic and changing world.
Yeah, and this is great, Moody. I love this because, you know, and I think it's because I actually take a totally opposite position, and I love that about us, right? Because I think it's worth getting a definition of authenticity because I think it there's a bunch of elements to it where it's you know it is hijacked as in like, hey, um, your authentic self is this higher self within you that is a fixed thing that is like borderline unachievable, and the pursuit of it is like going to constantly make you miserable, right? Which I
Mm,
understand. There's also the way that some people, like some specifically like therapeutic methods, talk about authenticity, specifically in like a Rogerian perspective, where it's like, this is what I feel exactly in this moment. I'm just going to say it, right?
mhm,
And that I think is like a very elementary outlook of authenticity, right? Because like you
mm,
said, it's like it's authentic to be different with with people, right? To show
mm,
up differently. That's just how the chemical reaction of the personalities intermingling happens, right? And there's nothing inauthentic about that. But what I think the pursuit of authenticity is having the tools to be who you want to be in every given moment, and working to
mhm,
have connection with yourself so that you can express
mhm,
that in the short term, medium term, and long term, right? Because
mm,
there
mhm,
are things that are going to be uncomfortable in the short term, right? But if you're authentically pursuing something in the long term, um, how you act in this shorter term thing might feel inauthentic, but it depends on what you're staying
mm.
true to, you know? Um,
Yeah.
and I think it's more about agency and who you want to be truly, and not be totally puppeted by the shoulds or by almost like a communal role set that's against who
Mm,
you would be. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what you said resonates, especially in being true to something, and I think that something is perhaps the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Can I show up true to my heart, um, in most interactions I'm in, with room enough to be a fallible, fragile human? But can I be true or authentic in the expression of how I'm feeling right now? Um, w- and and uh, without forgetting that we also have a responsibility towards each other. So just because I'm thinking or feeling something doesn't mean I should say it if it's going to cause harm.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where I think authenticity gets wrapped up because a lot of people think of it that way. It's
Mm,
like, oh, it's there. You're not, you're being fake if you don't say it. It's like, no, my
mhm.
authentic
Yeah.
truth is more, I want to be that safe communal space,
Mm,
right? I care way more
yeah.
about that than I care about just being able to say whatever's on my mind, that like a monkey
Yeah.
mind kind of thing. You know what I mean? Um,
It comes back to something we talked about in class. Nathaniel said something to the effect that the spiritual path is all about discernment. And so authenticity perhaps is related to this too, how discerning I am and how I show up right now.
mhm, mhm. And it's a big deal. Frankly, dude, that pursuit's the whole reason why I ended up at Naropa. You know,
Mm,
because I had a near death experience where you know, in the hospital bed, looking back at the person that I was up until that moment, I would have regretted my life.
mhm,
The
mhm,
time that I spent being someone else was way more than I spent being who I really am. And I didn't create the environment to be who I really am. I kind of like a dead fish, went with the flow of just kind of whatever direction was going to arise. And there was a lot of cultural understandings, right, from where I come from about, you know, basically settling. It's a normal thing to settle in a career. It's a normal thing to settle in a relationship. It's a normal thing to settle in not being able to express who you really are because of these external things.
mm,
And I realized this disease that exists, not just in like, my hometown, but it existed in me, like that's how I lived. And, I had this new voice in my head after that where it's like, is this why you survived? Did you survive to do this?
mm,
And it was the greatest gift, really, because it just kind of made me aware of the human condition, right? It's like,
mm,
I don't have some sort of, um, what I didn't go through some sort of rite of passage so that I can now say like I'm on my second life and like, I'm the only one that can talk about how precious life is. And your, authentic expression in your own life is like what you should pursue. It's that's just what I needed to go through to unveil the human like experience, period. Right? It's
mm,
like we are all potentially close to death. You could be
mm,
here any moment, you know? And it's like, did you live a life worth dying for?
mm,
You know, that's a real question where it's like, about hitting these marks. And, yes, it can make you miserable, right? And it can be in pursuit of something that you'll achieve and then have another goal and then achieve and have another goal and then just like go on and on and on. And I think that almost needs to be someone's pursuit of the good to constantly keep themselves in check and to constantly keep themselves on a path towards something that they perceive as good. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's how I kind of see it, you know?
yeah. Um, if it feels true to you, I think that's ultimately what matters because it helps you inhabit a life that you know how to love.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, if we cannot love the life we're in, is it really worth living? Um, I want to say
Hmm.
yes, it is worth living, and we can also find ways to change our relationship to it. But it's important that we know how to belong to who we are and what we have.
Yes, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So does that not feel like, just to like linger on the authentic thing, does that not feel like an authentic pursuit or the pursuit of authenticity?
Um, well, I see authenticity as a present moment thing, so there isn't
Okay.
really a pursuit or a chase.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. In that view, yeah, that's just
yeah.
in every moment to moment. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so I could have and I do have visions and dreams of things I'd like to accomplish and um identities I might see myself as and I hope to, to step into those roles too. But to be authentic is asking me about how am I showing up right now?
Mm. Mhm. You seem to be showing up pretty authentic to me.
I feel as if I am. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And frankly, dude, that's one of the things that, you know, knowing very little about your, life's journey and like, just being able to interact with you in class and stuff like that. I felt that from you where it's
Mm,
like, this is a person that has understanding about who they are. Maybe not completely like everybody, there's blind spots. Everybody's got blind spots, but
mm,
um you are in my view of authenticity, like being very true about how you're following your
mm.
path and how you speak any words and how you show up to things and how you um express your love for other things, man. I mean, like, yeah, I think that's a very true thing about you, you know.
Yeah. In a poem by Mark Knipo, he says, "Let the heart be our skin." And I feel that I
Mm,
wear my heart on my skin or my sleeves
mm,
um, pretty well, and I don't know that I have a choice in it either.
mm. What makes you say
I,
that?
um, I I've tried pretending to be other persons, and
Mm,
to live a different life, and I could not withstand being in that place or being whoever I thought I wanted to be. Um, and so it comes out of no volition of my own, at least the way I experience myself, to show up with my heart on my sleeve. And that seems pretty authentic. Um, I I really credit, at least in my journey, my time spent in solitude and in um, inner contemplation and reflection. Uh, that's a relationship I find that's sorely sort of looked over. You know, we have relationships to each other, we have relationships to the divine or the mysterious, to the ground, and we also have an inner landscape. And that is for me a really important place to visit and be with every day in order to know who I am and how I'm showing up.
That's absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah, a developed internal space is essential along that sort of path, at least in the way that, um, in the way that we're talking about authenticity in this moment.
Mm,
If you don't have a developed internal space and you don't spend time there, really weeding out what you believe, what you don't believe, what you feel and what you don't feel, what you've been like covering up, or what you feel like you should be versus what you are.
mm,
Um, Yeah, if you don't sit with those kind of contemplations and you just like distract yourself on a phone, or you just like
mhm,
distract yourself in drinking or some sort of vice, or dive into a video game or whatever, then where are you? You know what I mean? Where is that person?
yeah. It's so important for me because it's an uncomplicated space where
Mm,
I don't have to assess, you know, what's going on in a conversation or with someone else. And I don't have anyone else around me to energetically intervene in the
mm,
space
mm,
or to be concerned about what they're seeing or thinking. And so I just have uncomplicated room to be
mm,
or to exist without an agenda or pressure to perform in a certain way.
mm, mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like your own belonging.
Yes. Yeah, I see it as like, and I'm not truly alone in that time too, because I see this as if I'm a companion to my own soul
Mm,
or my inner self, and that soul or self also has needs,
mm,
and I need to show up for them or for
mm.
us.
For us, dude, that's cool. That's a cool way to think of it. Yeah, what is that? So the soul, are you dialoguing with it in a sense of like in a higher self sense, would you
At times
say?
I
Or
Yeah. At times when I journal, I journal every day, and it's important for me to process just my experiences, and shit happens all the time. And my journal is a great place for me to work it out. And at times, this voice will come in and start writing back to me, start journaling back to me. And I know that I've accessed someone, something internally that's helping to guide me. And so I do have conversations with that witness or presence that dwells inside,
hmm,
or perhaps around too. I I don't really know where they are, but
right.
they're with me in some form. Yeah.
Man, that's super cool. Do you feel like it's when you say they're with me in some form, um, we're talking about like a plural sense?
Yeah, or the non-gendered, non-binary sense, as in God, they are
Okay.
with me too. Yeah,
No, sure, right.
yeah.
Right. Is that I do think, yeah, this is a fascinating conversation, and to get into attuning to not, God or higher self, or maybe even some entities that are here with you, right?
Mm.
which I don't even think, like, I don't know, I've had enough experiences with that to know that, like, there's a lot more around than, like, what our biology is picking up on
Hmm.
and what our culture accepts. Um, yeah, dude, I actually had a really crazy experience where somebody helped me move something that had been with me since I was a kid. Um,
Hmm.
and after it like moved out of me, I could like, I laid it like as a kid, I used to never be able to sleep, right? I'd just be like this little like, insomniac machine where I was just like staring at the dark for hours. Like, I don't know. I would like literally try to keep my eyes fixed in a position until like the darkness kind of like wrapped around them. I couldn't see anything at all. I don't know if you've ever tried that at night, but I would just do that out of boredom. I don't know, some weird. And then one day I had a out of body experience where I was like 4 or something, and I like woke up in the top left corner of my room, and I was like floating towards the ceiling, and I like turned around and saw my body and laying in bed, and I thought I was dying. So I like, but then I immediately snapped back into my body, and my body position was in the same position. I saw the sheets on the bed were the same, the sunlight coming through the window. Everything was the exact same as I saw it. And I was like, shit, if I would have known I wasn't dying, I would have flew around a little bit and had some fun, right? Like, obviously, like having the ability of flight as a kid, it's like, that's the coolest thing. Um, but after that, there was just kind of a lot of, I don't even like to use the word, there was a lot of like spiritual things happening around me where I suddenly was, as I aged, I have many experiences. I could spend this whole podcast talking about like experiences like that. Got to the point where I used to take kids in middle school to this local graveyard and show them how to see spirits. And it was
Wow.
like a huge part of my life. Anyways, all that being said, there's these like kind of energies. Maybe it's a former person. Maybe it's the cultivation of the manifest ability of God consciousness that creates a certain entity. But it's interesting how they stick to people and then also possess people. It's like kind of another Jung concept, right? Ideas don't have people, people have, or people don't have ideas, ideas have people, is what it is, right?
They choose us. Yeah.
They choose us. They choose us. And I wonder sometimes if certain entities do too. And the more that you
Mhm.
kind of align yourself with um, this kind of higher way of being, this kind of internal connection, this sorting of like what is me and what isn't, that trying that you mentioned to be somebody else,
Right.
was almost like the possession of an idea that you tried to manifest that made you miserable. And I've done the same thing, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely, I've done the same thing. And something Piaget says, like whenever kids play house, they don't mimic their parents exactly, right?
Mhm.
There's some
Mhm.
sort of understanding they have about the role and they play it out. And it kind of makes you wonder where all of that comes from.
Mm.
I'm not entirely sure it's all just biological. Yeah.
Yeah, we can easily pick up ideas from the environments that we are in, and that has a big influence and impact on who we are. At some point in our discussion, you said something about being in an environment that can help you grow, and I think about this in the way of a seed. If a seed isn't planted with the right conditions of soil, sunlight, water, and even wind, harsh wind, so that a tree can become stronger, then we just don't grow into who we can beautifully become. And in certain parts of my life where I was trying to pretend, I now recognize that I was planted or had chosen or walked into an environment that wasn't conducive to my growth. And so, uh, in the way that we've talked about in classes, education is to draw out. So we contain these possibilities inside of us, and once in the right environment, there is a resonance that then draws us out into our full expression.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's beautiful. I'd love to know more. What was the, yeah, I guess I'm curious, what was the What did you realize, and how did you trust that inner knowing to be like, I need to go somewhere else?
Yeah, there's a children's book I read a while ago through a friend called Goldilocks and the Three Dinosaurs. And at the end of the book, it says, if you find yourself in the wrong story, leave.
Mm,
And at
mm,
some point, I realized I was living the wrong story. And I had a choice to stay in the story that I was in and the mythology I was in, or
mm,
to go find or write a new one. And
mm,
that's what I did. I just had an inner calling to um, s- step out and find something new. And I don't know how to describe how that calling might come to you or how someone might hear it, but there's a specific attunement to the heart. And I just knew that I had to do this thing,
mm,
which essentially upended everything I knew or had to
mm.
start completely new. And I quite enjoyed the process, to be honest. I like such big change. It's an opportunity to reinvent and to try out who else I could be.
Mm, yeah, and figure out what feels right, what doesn't, and actually have the space to experiment with that and find out, right?
Yeah.
Like, where were you when you were like, I'm out of here? And where'd you go? And what'd you do? I'm so
I
curious about the story.
so um Slightly before the pandemic, I divorced my then husband. We lived together for a short while after that because we were still friends. And then I found my own place, March 2020. Um, Moved in. This was the first time I've ever lived alone. I had a restaurant at the time, and
Mm,
my husband then was a state senator, and um, we had gone through a civil rights lawsuit in Utah. And so our lives were very public, you could say,
mm,
and entrenched and embedded in the community.
mm,
And so 2 weeks into my own apartment, COVID shut down the whole city
mhm,
and the world. And we also closed the restaurant for about 6 to 8 weeks. So not only was I on my own in my own place for the first time in my life, but I also didn't have anything to do because the restaurant was shut down.
mm,
I mean, I took care of things, but I didn't have a daily job like I was used to.
mhm,
And in the silence and in the aloneness, I started to hear that inner voice. And
mm,
I was just drawn or guided towards certain practices and reading a lot of books. And I finally could be in solitude enough to discover something about myself.
mm,
And that changed everything for me. So I then sold the restaurant. I had finished my divorce at that time, and I was left without a lover, without a job.
mm,
And my friend circles had completely changed too because I stepped out of an environment of drinking and partying and
mm,
whatnot. So I was, mostly alone and trying to discover what path to take next. But I just continued on trusting whatever showed up and
mm,
whatever felt true. And that brought me here to Naropa.
mm.
Yeah.
Wow, man. Wow. That's really
I, I'll,
something.
I'll add one thing too. I think all of this comes with a lot of grief and the necessity to be able to companion our grief. Because when you lose sense of who you are or your past identities and everything you had, every loss comes with grief. So it's important in a process like this, I think, to be a companion to that sadness or that grief, and to not run away and just trust that it too is being composted into something new.
Mm. Almost seeing a grief as this thing, almost like another thing within you that you know needs to move through you and like
Yes.
assist it almost.
Hmm. Yeah.
Assist.
Yeah. I mean, we can't move through change without losing something. And so we cannot lose something without some grief,
Mhm.
which is perhaps why we resist change.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And also all the existential concerns, right? It's like freedom, death, meaning, and
Mm.
isolation,
Mhm. Yeah.
avoiding all those things.
My
Um,
favorite topics.
yeah, yeah, same. Yeah. Wow, that's such a story, dude. That had to be monumental. Did you know then that you wanted to pursue, so like through these kind of, so you're in your, let me just rewind to you being in your apartment and you kind of having this realization like I need to make a big change with my life, right?
Mm.
Um, what was that initial goal? Like, was it Denver? Was it Naropa? Or was it
No.
psychology? Or like, yeah, what was the next step?
I was involved with a writing group in Salt Lake City at the time, and I trained as a facilitator, and so I started to facilitate writing and poetry circles, and I just wanted to pursue being a writer and a poet.
Mm.
Had this naive belief that that can provide me an income, which is not true. It is true for some people and very few some people. Um,
Right.
but I started to notice around the writing table how therapeutic it is.
Mm,
And I'm, you could say, obsessed with poetry and writing and the inhabiting of it, the practice of it as a contemplative way of being in the world,
mm,
that I wanted to pursue it in a more prof- professional sense as a healing modality,
mm,
um, and somehow found Naropa. And in my 3 year, almost 3 year, every paper I've done has been on either poetry and or writing and how it is a therapeutic modality.
mm.
Um, and I also have since I have 2 books coming out next year, so, the verdict on whether or not that can provide me with a living is still, up in the air, but I don't think those books would have happened for me had I not moved out here. There was a lot for me in store here, and I'm so glad I did.
Mm, mm. So did you know about Naropa? Did you like move specifically for that or yeah.
Yeah, I was visiting a lover here, and his roommate was a student there, and she told me about it, and so I, checked out the campus and the website and applied and had all these big starry-eyed dreams about what this place is,
Yeah. Yeah.
and realized how, same with the horse, all the expectations and projections I had put onto this place, and then slowly sort of just come to terms with what it is, and that was its own journey.
Yes. Yes. I feel like everybody has to go through that at this place, you know.
It's a great experience in really setting down our hopes, not in a pessimistic way,
Yeah.
but in having then an opportunity to meet what is. So
Yeah.
for all of the problems that Naropa is riddled with, and honestly, the same can be said about any other university, I think there is a great teaching here in um, how to set down our striving and just be with what is. And I think
Mm.
that will be something I take with me. You know,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more about Naropa. And it's fascinating as I find myself being in a really unique position having done my undergrad and getting my graduate
Mhm.
degree there because I've gotten to know the faculty a bit. I've gotten to know the way Naropa functions. And the beauty in it is the contemplative education and the people that it attracts because some of the best minds I've ever met have been from there for sure. Um,
Yeah. We're an eclectic, attuned, intelligent cohort.
yes. No, not just a cohort, but like, yeah, and it's funny, right? Because there's kind of peaks and valleys about
Yeah.
in the quality. And that's like I think a great function of Naropa actually. I've come to really appreciate that about the school. But also like anybody can start a student group. Anybody could apply for funding from like the student union. Anybody can
Mhm.
have these like events that they want to put on. You know, you can easily walk into anyone's office that's like a part of any aspect of that. You can't do that at major universities. It's
Oh,
way more difficult to go through all of that. So the
yeah.
stuff that you're able to kind of like make your own with some like taking some just taking up some responsibility and getting after it. I mean, you can do so much here, you know.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and there's room to just be weird, and I really
Yeah. Yeah.
really value.
You know, it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to man, I could talk to you about this forever. I feel like I really want to know more about your story and kind of like how things unveiled for you about like moving and selling the restaurant and
Mm.
how that was for you with the friends because you know friends that you gain around partying never stay, right? It's like that's
Mhm.
always something that you know I thought was different with my friends too, and of course that wasn't the case, which is fine because you know, you're talking about like the influence of other psyches. Like you got to
Right.
rationale all the change that you're trying to make to people that aren't on that same path or
They
vibe.
won't understand it.
They
Yeah.
don't. Right. Right. Talking about an isolating experience. So I'm sure that was, I'd love to get into that with you. But I also want to ask you about myth a little bit more.
Mm.
I'm curious,
Mhm.
what do you see as, what myth are we living in right now? I know that's a broad question, but how would you see our myth?
Yeah, I think there's a complexity of them, it's a tapestry of myths, and some of them are competing, some of them are aligned, but I do sense a general, direction or story unfolding towards awakening in the heart and recognizing that all we have is this planet and each other, and at the end of the day we don't have anywhere else to go.
Hmm.
And so i'm I'm doing what I can, as are you and the people that we know, to continually orient towards this um scary, but I find comforting idea of impermanence,
Huh. Mhm.
and miraculousness that we exist at all. And so the responsibility and the duty toward each other.
Mm.
Is that the common mythology? I don't think so,
Yeah.
evidenced by all the wars and our current political landscape. But I think there are enough of us that are continually tilting the scales towards it.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, and I think if as long as we keep expressing this, I mean, that's the whole point of the podcast, right? It's just to allow a little window into conversations like this about what kind of future we actually want to live in and what a lot of like people that are on a spiritual path and you know, a path to I don't even know what to say, creation or a path to I think of like ultimate goodness, or maybe the path of the heart as probably a good example or a good way to talk about that. The people that are truly on the path of the heart, um, I just want to do what I can to boost their, you know, their message and kind of hopefully, hopefully this is more of a community making mechanism than anything else. So, yeah,
Yeah, it's a sangha.
it's a
It's
sangha. Yeah.
refuge in the sangha of all of those who show up every day to love the world.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely, man. Well, Moody, I want to give you enough time to prepare for whatever meeting that you got, and I appreciate you
Thank you,
coming on,
Austin.
man.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
I'd love to do it again sometime because there's a lot I want to hear about your life. I want to hear about like what practice you want to have, like how poetry, um, will be in your therapeutic practice. Whenever you open up your own thing, and
Yeah.
even if you want to do that, there's so much. And then we didn't really talk much. We touched on Sufism, but I wanted to hear about your kind of journey there. And
Mhm,
there was something you said in class about Tinatonal, about Islam, actually.
mhm,
And I wanted to pick your brain about that because it seemed pretty profound for you. And I wanted to
mhm.
kind of hear about that story. But we'll save that for another time.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we'll just put a little pin in that for part two, if you're down.
Yeah, absolutely, and you can read about all of this in my book when it comes out next year too, so
Yes. I'll do
so
all the
there's
posting for that. You just
a
let me
lot of
know when that
opportunities.
happens.
Yeah,
Yeah, dude.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll do another one of these specifically
Okay,
around the book, and then you could use it
great.
wherever you want. And then,
Okay,
yeah, it'd be great.
great.
Cool,
Awesome.
man. All right, Moody.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Austin.
much, bro.
Okay, we'll see you soon.
Sounds
Bye.
good.